Christopher Nolan has spent decades making films about brilliant people destroyed by the things that make them brilliant. About characters who hide behind identities, manipulate reality, construct elaborate plans. About stories that refuse to reveal themselves in a straight line. And above all that, about the way time transforms people and makes certain losses impossible to recover from. Which is why the Odyssey feels like such an extraordinary fit for Christopher Nolan. At first glance, it might have seemed like a surprising choice to adapt the Odyssey. Nolan is known for modern cities, espionage, superhero, science fiction, war, historical drama. And Homer gives him gods, monsters, ancient ships, myth. But underneath the surface, the Odyssey may be the most Nolan story I can think of, because the story already contains the three great ideas that have defined his career. A flawed genius, a puzzle box, and the weight of time. And when you look at Nolan's filmography through those three lenses, the Odyssey begins to feel like the film he's been preparing to make his entire career. 1. The flawed genius. Nolan's protagonists are often extraordinary because of the very qualities that threaten to destroy them. In Memento, Leonard Shelby's determination helps him investigate his wife's murder, but his memory disorder makes him vulnerable to manipulation. In Inception, Dom Cobb is brilliant, an architect of dreams, but his inability to let go of his dead wife keeps him trapped in those dreams. And in The Prestige, Robert and Alfred are capable of creating the impossible, but their obsessions with surpassing each other destroy their lives. And finally, in Oppenheimer, his extraordinary intellect allows him to change the world, while also creating a burden he can never escape from. But what these characters share is not simply intelligence. They get in their own way. Arrogance, curiosity, obsession, and hubris, pride. The belief that their intelligence gives them the right to go further than any other person. And Odysseus is the ancient version of this character. His greatest weapon is his mind, and Homer called him polytropos, the man of many turns. He came up with the Trojan horse. He escapes the Cyclops by calling himself nobody. He survives impossible situations through metis, the cunning intelligence that allows him to outthink stronger opponents. But his intelligence is inseparable from his pride. And after escaping Polyphemus, the Cyclops, Odysseus is already safe. He's already won, but he can't resist telling the Cyclops who defeated him, Odysseus. And that single act allows Polyphemus to curse him and gives Poseidon, the father of the Cyclops, a reason to pursue him across the seas, causing the ensuing 10-year journey to return home. And that is the Nolan contradiction. The quality that saves the protagonist is also the quality that creates the next disaster. And this is where Nolan's adaptation becomes especially interesting. Rather than simply celebrating metis, the film asks whether intelligence, cunning alone, is enough to make a man agathos, good, noble. Is a good man simply the man who wins? Or, as Nolan asks, is he the man who understands the obligations he owes to other people? And that question leads directly to our second major idea. 2. The puzzle box. Nolan's films rarely give the audience a story in a straightforward way. Memento moves backward through time. The Prestige hides the truth behind competing performances and secret diaries. Inception builds narratives inside narratives, dreams within dreams. Dunkirk intercuts three timelines moving at different speeds. And Oppenheimer reconstructs a life through shifting perspectives, particularly Oppenheimer and Strauss, as dramatized by the Senate hearings and the inquiry into Oppenheimer's ties to Russia and communist groups. In the Odyssey, Nolan places us inside Plato's cave, where we are all like prisoners who see only our shadows and the shadows of one another. We believe we understand reality because we only have access to a limited perspective. And Nolan's stories are not simply built around twists, they're also about the instability of perception itself, ontology. This forces the audience to engage with the material in a way that a linear story often does not. It forces us to actively reconstruct meaning. Instead of simply receiving information, we become participants in the process of interpretation. And the Odyssey is already built on this epistemological foundation. It begins in medias res, in the middle of things. We begin with Telemachus in Ithaca searching for information about his dad. The Trojan War is already done. Odysseus has already been gone for years. The suitors are already consuming his household, his oikos. And later, Menelaus recounts his own return from Troy and the information he's gathered about Odysseus. And Odysseus himself eventually tells a story of his own journey. The epic is therefore constantly changing narrators, locations, and perspectives before these separate threads converge. And that is where Nolan's version becomes more than a puzzle. The mystery is not simply who is Odysseus, it's also what kind of society has been waiting for him, which leads us to our final point. 3. The weight of time. In Interstellar, Cooper's journey through space separates him from his children through the passage of time. In Dunkirk, time becomes the pressure driving every decision. In Tenet, time itself becomes the battlefield. And in the Odyssey, time is fundamentally how a story about what time does to human beings is realized.
Help me go home.
Odysseus is gone for 20 years. When he leaves Ithaca, his son Telemachus is an infant. And when he returns, Telemachus is a young man. Penelope has spent 2 decades waiting. And Odysseus himself is no longer the man, the agathos who left. This is the emotional paradox of the story. Odysseus spent 20 years trying to return to a life he remembers, only to discover that time has transformed everybody, including himself. That is the same emotional territory Nolan explores in Interstellar. What does it cost to finally return? And this is where the theme of nostos, or homecoming, becomes crucial. Odysseus wants to go home, but homecoming is not simply geographical. And as in Interstellar, this is where time and place must converge. Odysseus is returning to society whose values have been corrupted. The suitors have violated the virtue of xenia, or hospitality. So, Odysseus is on one hand trying to reclaim his life, his son, and his house, his oikos, and on the other hand, he's trying to restore a world in which certain obligations still matter. What Homer presents as Zeus's law, the obligation to respect the stranger and uphold sacred duties, has echoes in later ethical traditions, from Kant's categorical imperative to the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd like done unto you. And more poignantly, to the Virgilian idea of responsibility. Writing the Aeneid in the 1st century BCE, Virgil created what the Odyssey and the Iliad do not, a full dramatization of the gift horse and the sack of Troy itself. But more importantly, Virgil revealed that the destruction of the past is also the beginning of another civilization. And as Queen Dido proclaims in Book 4 of the Aeneid, let someone arise from my bones as an avenger. And the future emerges from the wounds of the past. This is why the Odyssey may be Christopher Nolan's deepest and most authentic film. Its foundational DNA already resembles the stories he's been making for decades, but more profound. Nolan did not simply adapt the adventures of Odysseus. What Nolan did was also adapt a story about a society's values. About xenia, the sacred obligation of hospitality. About nostos, the desire to return home. About what it means to be agathos, a good, worthy, and excellent person within a particular moral world. About oikos, the household, family, inheritance, and social world that make home meaningful in the first place. And perhaps most importantly, about what happens when the values that hold a society together begin to collapse. Many people will argue that this interpretation moves away from Homer's original intention. Emily Wilson, I'm talking about you. That it turns a story about cunning, heroic polytropos Odysseus into something more psychological, more modern, and more concerned with the structures of our society than Homer intended. But that criticism may actually underestimate the sophistication of Nolan's approach. And herein lies the irony. For Nolan, the Odyssey itself is a kind of Trojan horse, where Odysseus appears to be a wily trickster, a man who survives through deception, but he is also the very character through whom we understand the values of the world around him. Through Odysseus, Nolan can explore what xenia, nostos, oikos, and agathos actually mean, not as an abstraction, but as values tested by war, memory, exile, temptation, and the collapse of social order. And perhaps this is what makes the adaptation so perfectly suited to Nolan. He is refusing to accept the Odyssey simply as a story about a clever hero's adventures, and instead examines what is actually inside it, An entire society, its values and its anxieties and the consequences of those values breaking down. In a sense, Nolan is doing what the Trojans didn't do, looking into the mouth of a gift horse. Because once he does, the story of a trickster hero reveals something much larger. A civilization's entire moral world hiding beneath the surface. And that inversion is entirely in line with what Nolan does best. Taking something we think we understand, looking inside it, and revealing what the real story was hiding there all along.